The atmosphere in Studio 8G was electric. Seth Meyers had teased all week about a royal surprise on late night, and now the audience could barely contain their excitement. Prince Harry, dressed casually in a fitted navy blazer and jeans, took the stage to thunderous applause. His grin was wide, his demeanor relaxed. He had become somewhat of a pop culture icon since stepping back from royal duties, and tonight he was expected to talk about his upcoming documentary series and maybe throw in a few cheeky jabs about royal life. But no one anticipated what was about to happen. The interview started off light. Seth joked about British tea habits, Harry laughed about American driving laws. But then, a noticeable tension crept in when Seth pivoted toward a more personal topic. "So Harry," Seth began, crossing his legs, "you've been quite vocal about mental health and media toxicity. But some people say you've profited off the very institution you criticize. Any thoughts?" Harry paused. He blinked. The easy smile faded just slightly. "Well, Seth," he said calmly, "I speak about my personal experiences. I don't speak for the monarchy. And I certainly don't do it for profit." The crowd gave a supportive cheer, but Seth didn't back down. "But isn't it a bit contradictory?" Seth pressed, his tone sharpening. "You criticize the royal family's lack of emotional transparency, yet you signed multi-million-dollar deals to tell your side. Don't you think that's, I don't know, opportunistic?" The air in the studio thickened. Harry leaned forward, now clearly tense. "I think you're oversimplifying a very complex situation," he said. "You weren't there when the headlines destroyed my wife. You didn't have cameras following you into therapy sessions or tabloid stories calling your baby a racial slur. So no, I don't think it's opportunistic to reclaim my voice." The crowd was hushed, hanging on every word. Seth gave a nervous chuckle, trying to diffuse the growing heat. "Fair point," he said, but then added, "Still, some people say you want privacy and publicity at the same time. Like, you walked away from the palace gates but walked straight into Netflix." That was the moment something shifted. Harry stared at Seth, his jaw tight. "You invited me here under the impression that this would be a conversation about the documentary and mental health," he said slowly, his voice clipped. "Not an ambush disguised as late-night comedy." Seth leaned back, surprised by the prince's sudden frostiness. "I'm just doing my job." Harry cut in. "And I'm done doing mine tonight." With that, Prince Harry stood up. The studio fell into an eerie silence. The cameras continued rolling as he adjusted his blazer, gave a nod to the stunned audience, and walked off stage without another word. Seth blinked in disbelief. "Well, I guess that's one way to make an exit." Laughter trickled in awkwardly, but the moment had already gone viral. By the time Harry's SUV pulled away from 30 Rock, clips of his walk-off were flooding X, formerly Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube. The hashtag #HarryvSeth was trending worldwide within the hour. Backstage, producers scrambled. PR reps were on calls. Seth paced his dressing room, clearly shaken. What was meant to be a headline-making segment had exploded into an international incident. And Prince Harry, he sat quietly in the backseat of the SUV, staring out the window. Meghan had warned him about late-night TV. He thought he could handle it. But the ambush had reawakened something raw inside him. And for better or worse, the world wasn't done talking about it. The fallout was immediate and unforgiving. Morning shows replayed the clip on a loop. Pundits and royal commentators weighed in from both sides of the Atlantic. Some praised Prince Harry for standing up for himself, calling the moment a rare glimpse of raw authenticity from a public figure often dissected by the media. Others accused him of being thin-skinned, unable to handle the very scrutiny he courted by entering Hollywood's arena. But behind closed doors, the tension was even more palpable. That night, Harry sat alone in his California home office, his phone buzzing non-stop. Meghan had taken the kids upstairs, giving him space. On his laptop screen, headlines screamed across tabloids: "Prince or prima donna, late-night meltdown, Sussexes bite the hand that feeds." He didn't read the articles. He didn't have to. A Zoom call notification popped up. It was his US publicist. When he answered, her expression was already tight with concern. "We need to get ahead of this, Harry," she said. "Damage control starts now. We can do a follow-up interview. Maybe with someone safe. Anderson, Oprah, someone who won't blindside you." Harry rubbed his forehead, sighing. That's the thing. I'm tired of doing interviews that have to be safe. Either I'm allowed to speak my truth, or I go back to silence. And I've done silence. It nearly broke me. Meanwhile, over in New York, Seth Meyers was fighting his own battle. Online backlash had begun to shift. Initially seen as the composed host handling an overreacting guest, he was now facing criticism for being condescending, for baiting Harry into a meltdown. Staff at Late Night were receiving hate mail. Hashtags like #SethTheSnake were gaining traction. His producers called an emergency meeting. We need to issue a statement, one suggested. Clarify that the questions were pre-approved. That there was no ambush. But there was, another murmured. You added that last question during commercial break. No one signed off on that. Seth sat in silence. He hadn't expected Harry to walk out. He thought he'd push back with charm or wit, maybe get a viral quote out of it. Instead, he'd triggered a man who'd spent years building walls just to keep breathing. By the next day, the storm showed no signs of calming. Then something unexpected happened. Prince Harry released a short video on his social media platforms. No studio lights, no glamour, just him, standing in his backyard, in a plain t-shirt and jeans, the California sun behind him. I've made a choice to speak openly about my mental health and my past, he said, looking straight into the camera. But when those conversations are manipulated or turned into clickbait, it sets us all back. Not just me, anyone struggling to be vulnerable. I don't walk off lightly, but I won't sit quietly while my story is twisted. To anyone who felt triggered, unheard, or unseen by what happened, I'm still here. I'm still listening, and I won't stop talking. The video racked up tens of millions of views in hours. Celebrities, therapists, veterans, and advocates shared it widely. He wasn't just defending himself anymore, he was starting a broader dialogue. Seth Meyers, watching the video in his office, exhaled deeply. The narrative had shifted again, and not in his favor. By week's end, the two men had spoken privately. No press, no cameras, just an honest conversation between two people who had both misjudged each other. They wouldn't be friends. They might never share a stage again. But they found something close to mutual understanding. And the world, for once, chose to listen rather than shout. Days turned into a week, and while the media frenzy began to settle, the aftershocks of the incident continued to ripple through both Hollywood and royal circles. For Prince Harry, what had started as a simple promotional appearance had cracked open a deeper wound, one that he thought he had long since healed. But fame, especially his brand of involuntary fame, never gave room for closure. And now, the world was watching to see his next move. Meghan noticed the change in him almost immediately. He was quieter at dinner, more withdrawn during their walks along the beach. She tried to draw him out, gently, carefully, but Harry kept brushing it off. I'm fine, he would say. But he wasn't. One evening, as they watched the sunset from their backyard, Meghan reached for his hand and said, "You didn't walk out of that show because you were angry. You walked out because you were hurt. And it's okay to say that." Harry stared out at the ocean, her words hanging in the air like the orange mist of twilight. He finally nodded. It's never really over, is it? No matter how far I run, it always finds me, the cameras, the judgment, the narratives. Meghan squeezed his hand. Then maybe stop running. Let's own it, fully. No more press tours, no more polite interviews. Tell your story once, on your terms, and be done. That night, Harry began outlining what would become his most personal project yet, a short, unscripted documentary episode titled, After the Walk-Off. No producers, no teleprompters, just him, a camera, and the truth. It was raw, it was imperfect, and it was powerful. He spoke about grief, about losing his mother and feeling like he had to wear a suit while the world mourned for him. He talked about trauma, how he had panic attacks before public appearances and nights when he'd wake up gasping, believing the paparazzi were right outside the window. He talked about fatherhood, how Archie's laugh gave him purpose, and how Lilibet's eyes reminded him of Diana. And then, he spoke about that night. I didn't walk out because I couldn't handle the questions, he said. I walked out because, for a moment, I was 12 years old again, being told how to feel, what to say, and where to stand, while the world pointed and picked me apart. I walked out because sometimes you have to, so the next generation doesn't grow up thinking silence is strength. The film was released quietly on a Friday night. No press release, no PR blitz, just a single post. For anyone who's ever felt cornered, I see you. And it exploded. Within hours, the video had been viewed over 50 million times. Mental health advocates called it a seismic cultural moment. Celebrities, veterans, young fathers, and trauma survivors reposted clips with their own stories, creating a ripple effect Harry hadn't imagined. Even Seth Meyers, now facing serious internal scrutiny from NBC and mounting online criticism, watched the video in full. Alone in his office, he didn't flinch when Harry described feeling ambushed. He knew it was true. He picked up his phone and, for the first time in days, texted Harry directly. I watched it. You were right. I crossed a line. If you ever want the mic back, unedited, uninterrupted, it's yours. There was no reply that night. But in London, across the Atlantic, a different conversation had begun. Inside Buckingham Palace, aides had flagged the documentary for the senior royals. For the first time, it wasn't filled with complaints or scandal, but quiet honesty, stripped of agenda. And even those who had once dismissed Harry's journey as a tabloid sideshow now sat in silence, watching the boy they once knew finally become the man he was trying to be. The walk-off had become a turning point, not just for Harry, but for anyone who had ever needed permission to walk away from pain and speak their truth instead.